Okie dokie. So, the three kind of Central European, Eastern European, Balkan countries that we're going to talk about today, Slovenia, Hungary, and Croatia, they have quite a lot of things in common. And to be fair, a lot of it originates from the territory, which is now Slovenia, but we're actually going to come to that a little bit later. So we're going to start off with Hungary, as it is arguably the most represented country of all of the three. So first off, we're going to start with the Hungarian bor making. Bor is it's not a joke. Bor is actually how the Hungarians call wine. So if you're ever looking for a wine list in Hungary, it's not going to say wine or vino or whatever. It might say bor. Am I saying that right?
Yes, absolutely.
There we go. Okay, so believe it or not, winemaking in Hungary started with the Romans, same as most of Europe. But they weren't really that important for the region, actually, and for the development of the wine. So the original Hungarian tribes moved into the territory somewhere around the 9th century, and they've already found vines there, so already things that were cultivated by the Romans, and even before them there were the Celts and the Illyrians, the Illyrian tribes, we're going to talk a little bit about later. Anyway, so they came in, they already started playing around with the vines, and then the biggest kind of resurgence or the biggest point in Hungarian winemaking happened after the attacks of the Mongols in 1241. So there was this guy, the King Bela IV, was a very young king actually, and as he was defending from the Mongols and he was afraid of being attacked constantly, he started to redevelop the whole country. He gave licenses, they built hundreds of fortresses all over Hungary, and he's also invested a lot in immigration and in vineyards. So they were consistently kind of extending invitations to winemakers from all over Europe. There were people from France, people from Austria moving in, bringing their expertise. And he's kind of the main reason why Hungarian wine really took off. And this was in the early 13th century, so quite a long time back. They were already talking about major exports of wine, even in the 15th century. Mainly Eger is a town, a village, which I'll show you where it is later, was one of the biggest exporters of wine at that time. And they were already mentioning the Tokaj wine, which was dry at the time, already in the 15th century. So really long history actually of winemaking. But they did have a problem, Hungarians, and that was with the Turkish invasion, with the Ottoman Empire that came in, which pretty much meant that most of Hungary was Muslim at the time. And obviously Islam prohibits the production of alcohol. However, they had this one good thing, because as you know, the Turks are not super religious, and they did allow Christianity to still kind of survive. Which meant that the monasteries were still producing a little bit of wine. So while the majority of the country had to kind of stop producing wine, there were still a little bit of it left. So there was a succession over there. And then in 1570, they formulated a method of winemaking, or sweet winemaking at the time, called asher. So what this is, and we'll talk about more in detail when we actually talk about sweet wines in a later session. But just to give you an idea, so you might see on the sweet wines of Tokaj, you might see Tokaj Asher, and this means basically they step on the grapes, on these berries. All of these berries are already infected by the noble rot. So they step on them for as long as possible. So they create like a paste, like a little puree. And once they have this puree created, they pour the wine or the must over it and then start the fermentation. So basically it's like the squash in England, where you put a little bit of syrup first and then top it up with water. They were pretty much doing the same thing with wine. But this is actually a beautiful thing, because it produces some of the most amazing, most complex wine, as we will actually learn a little bit later. Anyway, so Hungarians, a very complicated history again. So the Illyrians and the Celtics, then there were the Romans, then there were the actual tribes, then there were the Mongols, then there were the Turks. And then finally they were kind of taken over under the Habsburg Empire, which was one of the leading forces in the late industrial era, I guess. So they have quite a varied culture, which affected their winemaking as well. Their biggest kind of alliances were always more linked to the Russians and the Polish and the Czechs and the Slovaks. So they were always a little bit more northern in thinking. The reason why I'm mentioning this, or northern and eastern, let's say, the reason why I mention this is because this is what you're going to see today in the session when we talk about Slovenia later on. So the countries are touching each other. They're literally on the border. They were part of the same Habsburg Empire as well, but the cultures are very, very different. And this is because of where they're kind of, where the alliances were lying, I guess. Tokaj is also famous for being the first national vineyard classification. So in 1707, no other country has said a particular area has a high quality of wine. Hungary was the first. Now, technically, Chianti was kind of ratified officially or Europe or globally earlier than Tokaj, but 1707 was the first kind of written law for Tokaj. I think they were actually ratified later on in 1735 or something like that. Anyway, just a little bit. I don't want to go too deep in history, but just to give you an understanding, again, if you understand the culture, then it can help you understand what resulted in the winemaking in that country. Okay, so this is Hungary. So I was talking about Eger before. So Eger, and this is where the mass production was in the Middle Ages, and this was kind of, this is what made it into an important region for them. And we're going to talk about the other regions that you kind of should know as well. So obviously the most important one, or the most famous one, the one that really kind of cemented Hungary in the world of wine, is obviously Tokaj. You can see it all the way up here in the northeast of the country, next to the Slovakian border. So they make wines out of two grapes, mainly Ferment and Harslevelu. They do have other grape varieties like Zeta and I don't know what else, a bit of Muscat, but these are the two main ones that are grown. And it would be a really good idea if you remember these, because what's so interesting about them, they're kind of like a Chardonnay of sorts, in the essence that they can really showcase terroir. They can really showcase where they're from. And especially Tokaj is such an interesting, in terms of soil, it's such an interesting land. There's a lot of rocks, there's a lot of different sediments. Obviously, I don't know if you know your history, but all of this area used to be the Pannonian Plain. So this used to be a sea millions of years ago. So it kind of left off a lot of sediment, which again makes for a very interesting composition of soil and again, beautiful expression of wines. In terms of grape varieties, what they are, so both of them quite high in acidity, which is perfect, especially if you're making sweet wines. Like we said, you need that acidity, you need that freshness to just kind of counterbalance it all. In terms of flavor, when they're dry, so like I said, today I'm talking about the dry stuff. I'm not going to talk about the sweet stuff. We will talk about that in a separate session. But when it comes to being dry, they're both kind of mineral and fresh. Harslevelu has this beautiful kind of a gooseberry and honeyed aromas. Ferment a little bit more tropical, a little bit more fruity, I guess. But yeah, absolutely beautiful grape varieties. And if you've never had dry Tokaj, especially M guys, we do have it on the wine list. We have the Lonyai single vineyard from Stephanie Beric. Beautiful stuff. And obviously the Asher system I've spoken about earlier. Eger. Oh, Eger, this country over here, and they are most famous for this one particular wine called Egri Bikaver. So Bikaver means bull's blood. Egri, obviously from Eger. And the reason why the wine has such an interesting name is because there is a legend, whether it's true or not doesn't matter. But the warriors that were defending Eger were drinking this particular wine, and they said that the secret ingredient of that wine that made them so strong was bull's blood. most likely it wasn't, but the wine itself is actually pretty beautiful. It's based on Keck or you might have heard of it as Blaufränkisch in Austria or Germany. But yeah, just a kind of a fruity, blue fruity flavored fruit. There are other grape varieties that go into it. There's a bit of Cabernet Franc that can go into it. There's Kadarka as well, which is a native Hungarian grape. But yeah, beautiful stuff. Problem with Agribica is it's inconsistent in terms of quality. You can get an absolutely amazing one, or you can get something that's going to make you vomit. Sorry, Hungarians. It's just the consistency that there's a problem there. That being said, Hungary as a whole has invested a lot into wine in recent years, and they've really brought up the education. They've really brought up the quality levels and so on. So you are actually getting great stuff from Hungary these days. Now, the last region, which is kind of my favorite, is Villani, and this one all the way down here. And the reason why I mentioned this is because I found Villani to be the best value region probably in the world. So they do grow grapes with Kadarka and Keck-Frankosch, so the kind of local grape varieties, but where the value really lies for me in Villani are the international grape varieties. You will have some of the most amazing Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignons, Merlots, things like that coming from there. They have the quality of some of the serious wines of France, let's say, at a fraction of the price. And again, that's a great move if you have wines from there, or if you're looking for a good value wine when you go out to eat. Always have a look at Villani. I think that is the best thing you can possibly do. Okay, there are obviously wines grown all over Hungary, but yeah, these are the three regions that I think are kind of the most important internationally. I think that it's a good idea if you do know them. Okay. Just a brief word about a couple of icons. Both of these guys from Tokaj. István Sepsi, fantastic winemaker. Another one of my quirky guys, I guess. Obsessed with details, obsessed with perfection. When you come to his house, he's got a load of rocks in front of his house, and he just, he can tell you each particular rock from which vineyard it comes from, what it does, what kind of effects it has on the rest. So yeah, just a crazy guy, obsessed with soil, only does single vineyard stuff, and really, really amazing wines. And Nimrod Kovac, bit of a funny name, Nimrod, I know. In English, it means kind of like a donut, I guess. But a fantastic winemaker as well, high quality of wines. Okay, I'm moving to Slovenia, so that's why we're not gonna waste. Well, not waste; it's a bad word, but we're not gonna spend too much time on Hungary, as good at it as it is. But again, with all of these kind of Eastern and Central European countries, whatever you want to call them, the trickiest bit is they're not as maybe regulated as the other countries. So it's not like you say, okay, in this region, this is the only thing you will find. There's a lot more going on there. So, and to understand that is, it just requires a lot of drinking and experimenting and just talking to people. You cannot learn it from a book or from a session like this. Okay. Anyway, moving on to Croatia. Croatia was first mentioned in terms of winemaking a very long time ago, even actually before the Romans. The first writer that actually wrote about Croatian wine was a guy called Homer. Did you ever hear of Homer, the guy that wrote the Odyssey? So actually in the Odyssey, he talks about the island of Mljet, which is the island all the way down here, and the winemaking that happened on that island. It sounds a little bit funny that they are actually making wine in Croatia, especially because, I mean, most of the country, or at least this Dalmatian part of the country and even the Kvarner up here, are both kind of in the Mediterranean climate. And you would expect that their wines wouldn't be really of high quality. But for some reason, they are doing really, really good stuff. They've always done really, really good stuff. but they are not internationally renowned. They were influenced by the Hungarians. They were kind of under the rule of Hungarians. Even Bela IV, the king I was talking about in Hungary, he owned Dalmatia, and he was also responsible for redevelopment of winemaking all over Croatia as well. That's why I definitely have to mention Hungarians in the same breath as them. Similar to Hungarians as well, they did have the Turks as well, and then later on the Habsburg Empire. So a very similar history to what the Hungarians had, which means that there's a lot of similarities over there. Most of the similarities you will find in the two regions in the north here. You'll find it in Slavonia and Croatian uplands. Now, Slavonia is, in my mind, the highest quality production region in Croatia. Dalmatia is a very, very close second. But there's one very important reason why Slavonia is so important. And we've talked about this with Italy, if you will remember. Namely because Slavonia is where they find Slavonian oak. And the Slavonian oak used to be used in Piedmont, used to be used all over north of Italy. And obviously they have it over here, which means that they were kind of at the forefront of using those barrels to kind of affect wines as well. So a very interesting region. In terms of grape varieties, they have some really, really cool ones, and we'll get to them in a second. Now, where the difference happened between Croatia and Hungary, and they went into different directions, was obviously after the Second World War and the proper formation of Yugoslavia. So Yugoslavia, for those of you that don't know, was Slovenia, basically all of the Balkans: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro. So basically, the Yugoslavian was a communist empire, which meant that the thinking wasn't about individuals. The thinking wasn't about, you promoting your own brand, but it was all about cooperatives. It was all about having one centralized winery that would kind of make wine for everybody else. And yeah, that just meant that while you had consistent, somewhat good quality, you didn't really have anything that would stand out. And that only changed after the independence of Croatia in the 1990s, where they finally started to look back into themselves. They started to really redevelop their winemaking, and today they're actually very good at it. Main reason for that is obviously as well, they are a beautiful seaside country. There's a lot of tourists that come to the country, which means that they have a good market to promote their wines. So while they will still only export maybe 10% of their wines, they still sell all of it. And like I said, mostly it's to the tourists that they have. Now, to the grapes. The most important one is Lenart Kaštelanski. Good luck pronouncing that if you are not from the Balkans. But yeah, have you ever heard of the grape? Anyone?
More or less, yeah.
Really?
It has something to do with the Zinfandel, no? A Primitivo is one of the
Correct.
or something like that.
Correct.
Or
So
maybe
yes, Lenart Kaštelanski is the official original home of Primitivo and Zinfandel, the two kind of very important varieties that everybody knows. Obviously Zinfandel mainly from the Americans and Primitivo from the south of Italy. But Lenart Kaštelanski is what the grape is, and this is where it came from. So when the Venetians were ruling over Dalmatia, they were actually the ones responsible for bringing it over to Italy. And then obviously the Italian immigrants, they were the ones that brought it over to the US, but this is where it came from. Lenart Kaštelanski is not grown at all really in Croatia. There's tiny bit on the island of Hvar, but other than that, you won't find the grape pretty much anywhere. Instead, you will find Plavac Mali, which is its son, kind of, and it's kind of like think of it as a Grenache type wine. It's bold, it's juicy, not too high in acidity, not too low, and yeah, just produce kind of deep, rustic, tannic styles of wine. And this is the grape you will find in most of the seaside vineyards. Malvasia is arguably their most premium grape varieties. So Malvasia, we've talked about, originating somewhere in Italy and grown pretty much all around the Mediterranean. Just kind of a neutral and delicious wine. It's not a particularly high quality one or a particularly complex one, but it produces good quality wines throughout. It doesn't really have poor wines, let's say. There's also a grape called Graševina. Graševina is the Croatian name for Welsh Riesling. So Welsh Riesling is basically white Riesling, as you would call it. It has no relation to the Riesling that we know, the German Riesling, the Alsatian Riesling, the Australian Riesling. The only kind of similarity it has to it is the relatively high acidity. And Graševina is probably the most drunk grape variety in Croatia. They will generally, this will be the house wine, let's say, for every country. And I think Pošip is also an interesting grape variety, and Babič that you can find. Babič is red, Pošip is white, that you can find in Dalmatia. Again, they're kind of difficult to remember, so maybe just kind of take a mental note. I'm sure you will make it to a holiday in Croatia sooner or later. Maybe go to the dance festivals or something like that. And if you want to order wines, kind of stick to these grape varieties. Okay. Now, the pièce de résistance. This is the reason why we're here today. Well, I'm here today. I don't care about you guys. So Slovenia. Like I said, all of these three countries are kind of interconnected. They were in the same area, more or less. They did diverge into different kind of ways, but they did originate from the same thing. And the original winemakers or the original wine growers were the Celtic and Illyrian tribes. So who were these guys? So basically they were nomads, and they were nomads. They came from the east. They came somewhere from the Caucasus Mountains. And their theory was that they will keep moving around and they will only settle in an area that you can grow vines. So they were actually intentionally looking for areas that can grow wine. And obviously this is not completely accurate because historians are still researching this. But it is said that Slovenia was the first area they populated because this was the most beautiful area that they could find that will grow wine for them. So that's how it started. So they were even before the Romans, they were before the Greeks. So we're talking about 500, 600, 700 years BC. The Celtics and the Illyrians were kind of inhabiting the area. These two tribes were also kind of the formation of the Slavic nations in general. So pretty much the Slavic language started to develop here. In terms of history, I don't really want to talk too much about history about Slovenia because, believe it or not, it is not the most important thing about Slovenia, and we'll get that with the next one. But just a brief one to go through. So because they were kind of the original winemakers of the area, they didn't really have many Roman and Greek influences. The only influences they took from them was actually the trade. So before they were using it for self-sustainability, but when the Romans and Greeks were in the area, they just focused a little bit more on the actual market as well and the exportation. Same as with everywhere, church took over the vineyards, the monasteries kept it going. Slovenia never had the Turks really, which was a good thing for us. It meant that production of wine never really stopped, which was good. The picture on your left is actually the picture of the oldest still producing vine in the world. So this is in Maribor, in the city in Slovenia, and this vine is over 400 years old, and it's still producing wine. So they still make wine every year out of it. It's got quite a spectacular occasion when they do it, and then they bottle the wine into very tiny little bottles, and they give it out to diplomats and stuff like that. So it's quite a special wine, I guess. Same as Croatia, obviously was part of Yugoslavia as well. So there was a lot of that co-op thinking, not that much of individuality. But again, we were the first country to get out of Yugoslavia, so in 1991 officially. And that gave us a bit of a head start on everybody else in terms of how we wanted to make our lives better, I guess. And this is kind of the main part that I want to talk about. And in Slovenia, history is not as important. What's the most important thing to understand Slovenian wine and to know what it's all about is to think about the culture. And what is the culture? So I'm going to show you like this. So Slovenia is all about owning a vineyard. So to give you an example, California, you've heard of California winemaking, one of the biggest producers in the world. They have about, the California as a state is about 400,000 square kilometers large. Slovenia is 20 times less than that, so about 22,000. California has about 3,000 wineries, but Slovenia has about 30,000 wineries. So this is why it's so special. In Slovenia, the whole dream is to own a vineyard. And it's nothing to do about export. It's nothing to do about making some super exotic, super special wines. It's all about the culture. It's all about having somewhere to go for the weekend, cultivating wines, having a harvest at the end of the year, making a barrel of 2-hour wine that are pretty much going to be self-sustainable. So they're going to keep you hydrated for the rest of the year. And it's all about the culture. So, and the pictures that I'm showing you, that's actually me. That's actually my family, and that used to be our family vineyard in one of the villages. That's me, little munchkin. And this was what we did. We did pretty much every weekend. We went to a vineyard. It wasn't professional farming. It wasn't like you talk about in France, where the winemaker is in the vineyard every day and controls every little thing. Here, like I said, it's more about the social aspect. And Slovenia has one of the best lifestyles in the world, I would say. You have, after work, you still have plenty of time to do things, and Slovenians in general are very outdoorsy. So it's the wine that keeps them going. So why am I saying this? Why do you care? So the reason why I'm saying this, like I said, because we're such a small country and we have 30,000 producers, nobody talks about Slovenian wine because there's not a lot of it. Every vineyard is less than a hectare big. The vineyard that we had here had about, I think, 900 vines, which is nothing. We produced about 800 liters of wine a year. You can't really export that. Most of it was just drunk at home. And this brings us to the second thing. When it comes to actual export wine or actual commercial wines, this is where Slovenia gets interesting. So in 1967, they already started to put in place quality controls. And you have kind of 4 different classifications to classify Slovenian wine. So first you've got the table wine, which just basically means a drinkable wine. Then you have kind of the geographical location wines, and then you have quality wine and supreme quality wine. So what that means is about 70% of all of Slovenian wines is actually at least quality wine, which means that it's a wine that is at least, if we talked about the point scores that we used to have, it would be like at least an 85 score rating. So 70% of all of wine is that. Only 30% of wine is stable wine. So the reason for this is because such a small percentage of all of these 30,000 winemakers make wine seriously, make it as a business. Nobody else actually labels their wines. Nobody else actually sells their wines. So the market is not flooded with low quality wine, which makes it great. If you ever go and buy wine in Slovenia, you will always get a good quality wine. That's the whole point of it. And also the other good thing about this is because everybody has a vineyard. So there's 2 million people in Slovenia. If 30,000 wineries exist, that means that worst case scenario, you are two stages removed from a vineyard. If you don't have it, your uncle has it, or your friend has it, or somewhere. There is always an excuse, and every single Slovenian has been to a harvest at least once in their life, which means everybody has kind of their own supply of wine. And that brings us to the good part about Slovenian wines. You go to a shop, to a Slovenian shop to buy wine, and it's dirt cheap. Like even in a shop, you can get a good quality wine for, I don't know, €4, and it's gonna be, you know, the same as you would buy a 30-pound bottle in London. So beautiful, beautiful stuff. Okay. In terms of regions, Slovenia has three kind of distinct regions. You have the Podravska region, which is all of the greens up here. You have the Posavska wine region. This is where I'm from. And you have the Primorska wine region. So again, these countries all border, these regions all border different countries. Where you have Primorska, which is next to Italy. So this is where Italy would be. They have a lot of Italian influences. So their cuisine will be influenced by Italy. Their winemaking styles will be influenced by Italy. So their style is very much like that. The Podravska, you have Hungary on the top here. So the Prekmurje part, especially up here, is definitely influenced by them. You've got Austria over here. So again, the cuisine influenced. Basically, what it means is this area makes sausages. This area makes goulash. Okay, so these areas will have wines that will match that food as well, like we talked about. This area over here, they make truffles, they make prosciutto, they make pasta, so the food will match up like that. Posavje, that we're down here, we hunt a lot. There's a lot of you know, deer and stuff like that. There's pigs as well. So you got sausages as well and things like that. And again, the cuisine will talk about that. Now, in terms of the grape varieties, so Primorska region is arguably the most recognized in the world of wine, especially this yellow bit over here, which is called Goriška Brda. Brda is basically means hills. In Italian, you would call it Collio. And this is actually the Slovenian part of the Collio when we talked about Collio Friuli. So Collio Friuli is just on the other side of the border here. Funny fact is that there's some Slovenian vineyards that are on Italian soil and some Italian vineyards that are on Slovenian soil, but they cultivate it without any issues. Like I said, in terms of grape varieties, most of Slovenian wines in general, I think about 68% these days is white wine. Only about 32% is red. Now, these are not absolutely accurate numbers because a lot of Slovenians won't report what they grow or they won't talk about it too much. But in general, white wine is the main thing that we work with. And the main white is a grape called Rebula or Rebula. We can't agree on how to call it, so I'm going to say it both ways. And it's basically the Ribolla Gialla grape that you can find in Italy as well. I have a bottle here from Eddie Simčić. He's a beautiful producer as well of Ribolla. This is a wine you can find on the wine list now in M. And I find it to be quite an interesting grape variety. It can be a little bit floral. It's got a little bit of like a salty minerality to it. So it's a beautiful wine pairing wine. And yeah, it's got this kind of a honey nutty aroma as it starts to develop. Now, the fun thing about Primorska in general is that, or Slovenia in general for that matter, is that a lot of people experiment. You will find people playing around with different types of oak. So you won't find much French oak here. We have our own Slovenian oak that we play around with. And it's also not just oak that we play around with. You have acacia, you have mulberry, all of these different woods that are used in terms of wine production. Some people even use the amphorae, the ones that they used in Georgia. Some people will use cement tanks. Some people will use, anything that they can find, they will play around with to see what it works. So again, just to complicate the country a little bit more. But yeah, absolutely beautiful wines that you can find here. Other grape varieties that are of very, very high quality, Civi Pinot or Pinot Grigio, and Modri Pinot, Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, arguably our best quality in terms of international grape varieties. If you find Slovenian Pinot Noir in a wine list, it's not going to be cheap because it's very, very hard to grow where we have it, but it is definitely of very, very high quality. So beautiful stuff if you find it. And the delicacy of the Primorska region is definitely the grape called Refošk or Refosco in Italy. And and most specifically, it is famous for being grown in this orange area here, which is called Kras, or in English, karst. And why this is so special is because these are these Terra Rossa red soils, and these soils produce absolutely epic wines. They make the Reforsk, which is generally kind of a similar to Merlot, not in terms of flavor, but in terms of how it operates. And it transforms that grape into something absolutely stunning. Teran produces a lot of anthocyanins. So remember when we talked about Uruguay and we talked about the Tanat grape being the most tannic and kind of the healthiest grape? Well, Teran matches that, or sometimes even surpasses that. It is one of the most deeply colored, deeply flavored wines that you can find in the world. Now, we've had a bit of a scuffle with the Croatians. They want to call their area Teran as well, which we don't really like. And I don't think we should, because it's our wine. But yeah, Teran is basically a wine made from Reforsk, but in this orange area, the Kras area over here. Second area that is kind of important is this, the kind of the Hungaro-Austrian influenced area of Podravska, with the main grape being Šipon, or ferment. If you remember, we were just talking about ferment in terms of Tokaj. And yeah, it just produces the highest quality of wines. Lashki Riesling, or Welsh Riesling, or in Croatia, we called it Graševina. Again, just don't worry about remembering all of the names, but just so you get an understanding that these grapes are kind of grown all over. Again, Lashki Riesling, generally used in terms of spritzers. So one thing I didn't mention when we were talking about the culture of Slovenia is also that wine is very much a beverage for us. And a lot of the time, most of the wine will be drunk as a spritzer. Basically, you need a plain wine that you're going to mix with sparkling water, mineral sparkling water always, because we have natural mineral sparkling water as well. And it just kind of serves as your hydration tool. So it's an unwritten rule, but if a friend needs to change his roof and you go and help him, there's always going to be an ice cooler with spritzers over there, and you pretty much drink that with no helmets or anything, any protection, and you just drink your way through work. Fun thing. Romani Muscat, or the Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain, or Muscat Automnal, is also another name. We've talked about these grapes, the similar grape to this, when we talked in Italy about Moscato d'Asti. It is very, very aromatic, beautiful stuff. And there's a little bit of a trick with Muscat in Slovenia. If you ever wanted to, seal the deal when you were on a date, every guy always had a bottle of the sweet Muscat in his fridge, because the ladies go crazy over it. Hopefully one day I can show you. I mean, not what I meant, but hopefully one day you can try it and see. It's basically super delicious. It's kind of a semi-sweet wine, still wine, but yeah, it just goes down really, really quickly. And luckily it impairs girls' judgment sometimes. They also grow Treminec over there, or Gewürztraminer, again, quite an aromatic grape variety. Obviously, this comes from the influences of Austria. Okay, last region we need to talk about is the Posavia region, Posavska Regia. This is from here. This is where I'm from. And this is the only of the three regions where there is actually more red wine grown than white. Not by a lot, it's pretty much like 51% to 49%. But where both of the others are famous for their whites, this is where most of the red is grown. Most important grapes from here are Modra Frankina and Modra Portugalka. And the reason why they're important is because they are native. So Blau Frankish and Blauer Portuguese are both grape varieties that are from this area. This is their native home, let's say. And they produce some of the most interesting red wines. Both of these are red grapes, by the way. Especially Modra Frankina, Blau Frankish, to me is one of the most interesting grape varieties because it has a lot of life. It's very vivacious, it's very fresh, it's got a lot of different things going on. It's got a little bit of energy behind it as well. So it's kind of one of those red wines that doesn't make you sleepy or anything. It just kind of gives you a little bit more energy. Obviously, you will find a lot of white grape varieties here as well, but these are kind of the staples, the most important things. The other reason why these two grapes, and also the third one that you can see there, which says Jametna Chernina, again, a local grape variety. I don't think there is a name for it in English, but if you wanted to translate it, it would be something like the velvet black grape or something. The reason why these three are important because they create a wine called Cviček. And Cviček is one of the two next to Teran that we talked about earlier. Only two DOCGs, let's say. And it's a very interesting wine because it's basically a mixture of red and white grapes. And it's a very light wine, generally under 10% of alcohol. Just a very juicy, very friendly. It's lighter than a Beaujolais. It's lighter than any other wines that you will find, red wines that you will find in the world. And its whole ambition is to just be approachable, and not a lot of it is exported. Not a lot of it is sold because most of the people have their own kind of vineyards and they just use it from themselves for their friends. People that make Cviček are known to drink most of it. So that's kind of a very important part of it. One thing I didn't mention is the production of sparkling wine, especially in the east. So both of these regions make some super serious sparkling wine traditional method, whereas the west will make more Prosecco style Charmat method wines. Obviously, I prefer the Eastern style. I just find it to be very, very high in quality. But anyway, that's enough about the regions, and we're gonna kind of finish off the most of the part. I just want to kind of take you through a few more photos just to give you an idea of what Slovenia is as well. So the picture in front of you is Špičnik. I know the words are really funny today. But yeah, this is the famous heart-shaped vineyard, so quite a romantic place if you ever want to go propose to somebody. This is kind of the place where you would want to do it. And one of the other reasons why I wanted to show you was this funny thing here. This is we might not be the biggest geniuses in the world, but we are very resourceful and very smart. So this thing over here is a wind-powered device that chases birds away. So in Slovenia, as the grape ripens at the end of the season, you have a lot of problems with birds. Obviously, as you can see, even in the pictures, a lot of the vineyards are next to the woods. So you will get animals in those woods that will come to the vineyard to try to feed themselves. So it's birds, you've got deer, all sorts of, pigs and stuff like that. Everybody comes to feed. And this device basically turns with the wind and makes a lot of noise. So it kind of just drives away the animals. Very ingenious. It's also a great excuse to, you put it up when the grapes start to ripen. So once you put it up, it gives you an excuse to have another picnic with your friends. And then obviously you have to take it down at a certain point as well. So a good excuse to have another picnic with your friends. Goriška Brda, so this is the region I was saying that is kind of the most interesting one, or the most internationally renowned one. Absolutely beautiful area. As you can see in the pictures, a lot of these Mediterranean houses, Mediterranean Italian influenced, I guess. But yeah, beautiful area, beautiful weather. Only problem they have is a lot of wind, which is obviously great for wine because it cools it down. But yeah, it can be quite dangerous sometimes as well. It can reach speeds up to 100 and even more kilometers an hour. This is a beautiful area as well, the bellier. This is on the coast. This is actually already Italy over here. So it's pretty much touching, but yeah, this is where you will find, I think these are the vineyards from Vina Koper, which is one of the largest producers in Slovenia. And this is where they would probably make their sparkling stuff. And lastly, this is my area. This is where I'm from, Bizeljsko, but these are the vineyards around the town that I'm from. And I wanted to show you these very, very interesting caves or cellars that they do. These are called Repnicem. So repa is a turnip, and basically these are kind of hand dug tunnel systems in the sand that they have over there. So nobody built this. This is literally dug into sand, and it gives you this beautiful, beautiful, you know, mosaics all over the place. And it's obviously perfect for storage of wine. The temperature never changes in here, so you get a constant temperature throughout the year, which is great for long-term storage as well. But yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful area. And I do have one thing I didn't mention and I wanted to mention. So when I was saying about that most of the Slovenian wine is actually a quality wine or a premium quality wine, you do have wines like this. I have a wine from a former flame of mine. Basically, even if you don't make enough to export, people will generally bottle their wines. Can I see it? And they will just put a beautiful label on it and just give it to friends for gifts and stuff like that. So like I said, winemaking in Slovenia is generally more of a cultural thing, something for you to feel close to the nature, close to family, close to friends. So that's why we arguably aren't as famous in the world of wine as we would deserve based on the quality. But that's it for me for today, guys. So any questions, anything you wanna ask? Anything I didn't mention, should have?
Well, you don't do Bordeaux varieties in Slovenia at all, or is just not remarkable?
No, we do. They are remarkable. I mean, Slovenia, you will find around, I think, 55 different grape varieties. And obviously Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, they are quite big as well, especially in the Goriška Brda area. In the Posavje area where I'm from, you will find quite a lot of Chardonnay, Gamay as well and stuff like that. But again, they're not really the grapes we should be known for, because all of these grapes that I was talking about today, they are kind of where I feel we should be focusing our attention on and just, trying to be competitive in this world with the same grape varieties. I don't feel much sense in it. Whereas these interesting grape varieties could make a big impact and just offer something different. So yeah, I wanted to focus on these instead. Namely, I think Rebula for white or Rebula for white, Refosco, Modra Frankinja, even the ferment. I know it's Hungarian, but the quality that they make in Slovenia is out of this world. So I really think these should be the grapes that Slovenia should be focusing on. So yeah, I'm hoping somebody actually watches this video and, decides to buy some of the quirky wines.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Thank you.
My pleasure.
There is any production of sweet wine in Slovenia?
Yes, as well. Especially in the western part, in the Primorje region, you will find a lot of picolit. There's a bit of muscat as well, and also the Refosco, the Teran, can be made into beautiful sweet wine. Teran in itself is also there's a byproduct called Terano liqueur, or the liqueur of Teran. It's a very, very delicate, very sweet. It's kind of like a fortified wine, really, that they make. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. They make everything in Slovenia: sparkling, sweet, rosé, whatever you want to call it. But the main thing is definitely white. Well, to be fair, sparkling wine is what we're famous for in terms of scores in competitions and stuff. Slovenian winemakers get a lot of gold medals and decanter wine awards and things like that. A lot of the time for sparkling wine. There's also a lot of people that are, because like I said, all of the farms, all of the vineyards are quite small. Everybody does everything by hand. There's no mechanical harvesting whatsoever. So the quality is high, and you will also people will also experiment all the time. They will make biodynamic wines, they make organic wines and things like that. So pretty cool stuff.
And modri means red wine?
Modri means blue.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's just like when you say Modri something, that means that is a red wine, no? All the time.
Yes. So Modra Franconia would be the blue. I think the correct English translation is blue Franconia. So yeah, blue would mean Modra.
Okay.
It's actually a very good question that you just said. It's always red. We do confuse this with a grape called what's it called now? Shit, I forgot the name. There's a grape that means blue instead of plavets, Romani plavets, which means the yellow bluey. I guess it's a white grape, but yeah, just to confuse things a little bit further.
Yeah, because for example, you know, when you go in Spain and you have vino tinto, you know that is red wine all the time.
Yeah.
Because they call it tinto or something else. That was the question. If the Modri or Modra was just for the red, or you can actually call a white wine even like this.
So if you're looking for how it's gonna say red wine or white wine. Red is the word is rdece.
Rdece.
Very good, actually. Very good. And white is bello. So bello vino and rdece vino. It's really hard for me to talk in two languages.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else, guys? All right. I think that's it for today then. The presentation is already up if you want to download it, and the video will be up in 2-3 hours. Cool.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Nikki, enjoy the sun, on the beach.
Huh?
Enjoy
Yeah,
the
we just arrived. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Ciao.